Hello again. It's the 30th of August and I'm thinking about next year's strawberries. I grew them in this bed over the past several years, and this year, although we got some nice strawberries, we didn't have the yield that we had previously, and I think probably it's time to think about them again. I think commercial growers change their plants on a rolling program about every 3 years or so. The original ones were planted here about 8 or 9 years ago, and I've taken the lazy approach of propagating new ones. There's been no weed suppressant fabric down, and I've just let the runners do their own thing and replant in the hope that new strawberry plants would keep appearing without too much effort. Well, maybe my luck's run out on that, so it's time to start again. When you're planting anything again, it's always good if it can be planted in a different area, in different soil. Soil might pick up viruses, it might pick up things that are problematic for the strawberries. It would be good to start elsewhere, but for a small gardener where I've got a fruit cage here, there's a question of where you move them to, and there really isn't anywhere, so they're going to go back in the same spot. But I have got a slight advantage because I've got these boxes around the beds where the strawberries were planted. They were never intended to be raised beds, they were straw boxes. There's straw down here for two reasons. One of them is because there's no weed suppressant fabric, the straw brilliantly suppresses the weeds. But the other thing is when the strawberries ripen, they settle on the straw rather than the wet ground, which is good in terms of maintaining their quality and not letting them deteriorate. So I'm going to make use of this box. I'm going to change it into a raised bed. I'm going to fill it with the soil I have in my secondary compost bed, and then when I get to the top I'm going to put weed suppressant fabric on it. So the weeds will be suppressed by the weed suppressant fabric, but also the strawberries themselves will fall onto the fabric when they grow, and so hopefully won't rot because they won't be in contact with the ground. In terms of future propagation, what I'll do when they grow is let the runners settle into pots and grow new strawberries from those, but I'll show you that when the time comes. The first thing I need to do now is to fill these beds up with earth. I've talked about this bed before. It's where I put the garden compost when it comes out of the compost bins behind me. It's got two uses. One is that it produces a large amount of compost that I can use for raised beds, and you probably may have seen on an earlier video that I used that when I made the raised bed last year for the new summer raspberries. Word of caution there, in that garden compost isn't nutritionally as well balanced as compost that you might buy in the shops, so bear in mind the needs of the plants that you're planting in it. I will be adding organic fertilizers to this in order to plant the strawberries. I'm loading it into a bag because it's not very far to the fruit cage, but it's a bit of a circuitous route and I can't get a wheelbarrow around it, so I found the least tiring way of doing it is to just fill up a small bag, carry it round and empty it into where I want to make a raised bed. The other use I put this into is that you can grow things in it, so I sometimes do courgettes or whatever in this compost bed. Well, it's going to take quite a few of these bags, but one thing you can say about gardening, it gives you lots of good exercise. Okay, well that's the strawberry beds for next year, filled with garden compost. I've also mixed it with some fish blood and bone to condition the soil a little bit and give it a little bit more nutrients. I'll talk a bit more about fertilising strawberries when I actually plant them. The next thing to do is to cover the beds with weed suppressant fabric. Okay, well I've covered the bed with weed suppressant fabric in the manner I've demonstrated in previous videos. I've just laid the fabric over the top and tucked the edges in with this lawn edger. I've also done two other things. I've cut holes in the fabric for the strawberries to go in. Depending on the strawberry variety, depending what website you look at, they talk about different distances. What I've tried to do, because of the pattern I've laid them out in, is leave about a square foot for every strawberry, and that I'm sure should be fine on average. The problem about having them too close together is about getting to nutrients, and to some extent that can be compensated by feeding them properly with tomato feed when they are fruiting. The second thing I've done is to put labels on the sections where the particular varieties of strawberries are going to be, in the manner I've also demonstrated before with paint pen written on little slate labels. You can categorise strawberries in a number of ways. One simple way to do it is to think about earlies, as in this area, southern England, starting to fruit in about May, mid-season starting to fruit in sort of June, coming on July, and late with sort of fruiting late July, August into September, and possibly, if one's lucky, up to the time of the first frost. There are, among those, there are strawberries which have several different, or can fruit on several occasions during the year, most commonly at the beginning of the season and the end of the season, and they're called everbearing. What I've got here is two earlies, two mid-seasons, and three lates, and there's a couple of everbearing within those, but I'll explain those a bit more when I plant them, because there's going to be a bit of a gap now. We're early September, and this is a time of year where the manner in which you plant the strawberries will change. Strawberries can be planted at any time of the year, but in the summer months they're quite often planted as pots, and I had thought I might get potted strawberries to put in, but I'm a little late for that now. Over the dormant period, which is October, November, December, over the winter, they are more frequently supplied as bare root, where you can just plant them in the ground. There's no disadvantage at all in having bare root strawberries. In fact, they're cheaper, partly because they don't require much packing. You can get lots of them all together. So I've ordered some, and they won't be available until mid-October. So I think we'll have to pause until then. Well, we have paused, and now it's the 28th of October, and here are the bare root strawberries that have just arrived. That's 3/4 of the amount that I'd actually ordered, because the supplier has held back some because the autumn has been so mild that they're not fully dormant yet. They've helpfully come in these brown paper bags, so I've just stood those in water for a couple of hours to rehydrate the roots, and then it'll be a question of starting to plant them. Also, the other helpful thing about keeping them in the bags is that the labels are still on them, so I can see what each one is. Okay, well here's the pack which says Strawberry Christine. I've already made the holes as I showed earlier, and also labelled this section already Christine. So let's take the soggy paper bag off where the strawberries have been soaking, rehydrating the roots. Oops. Should be 5 in this pack, so let's just separate them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If the roots were particularly long, it's probably worth shortening them. These aren't enormous, so I'm just going to leave those as they are. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use the pot in the ground approach, as I call it, for these. So the first thing I'm going to do is core out about 4 inches of the bed. I'm now going to plant the bare root strawberry. The depth at which it's planted is quite important, because if you bury the crowns they'll rot, and they don't want to be too far out of the ground. What to try to do is to get the surface of the ground to be just about where the top of the roots are, so the crown is just sitting a little bit above that. And what I'm going to do with this pot in the ground approach is to backfill with new organic fertiliser. It's useful, I think, to put them out this time of the year, or if they're in pots, don't protect them too much, because in order to fruit next year they find it helpful to, that's a root, they find it helpful to be exposed to the cold weather. I mean, I'm not packing it in too much. We want the roots to be able to breathe. You don't want super consolidated soil around them. So I'm just trying to gently push that down, and I've just about covered the roots, but I've not covered the crown just above them. Okay, well, we've got Christine and Vibrant that are earlies. We've got Marshmallow and Cambridge Favourite that are mid-season. We've got Malwina and Flamenco, which are late season, and we've also got spaces for Marling Allure, which are late season, and are the ones, if you remember, I said that the supplier was holding them back because we've had a very mild autumn. Okay, well, that's the strawberries in. Now it's time to order the cream for May time. Thank you very much for watching. As always, I hope you found something useful or interesting in this video.